When most people start playing Conquest of Azeroth, they focus on the obvious things. They spend hours deciding which class to play. They watch tier lists. They search for the best builds. And they rush toward endgame as quickly as possible. But here's the funny thing. Some of the best parts of Conquest of Azeroth aren't advertised anywhere. They're not explained very well. The game doesn't stop and tell you they exist. Instead, you discover them naturally over time, usually after dozens of hours of playing. And when you finally do, you usually end up saying, "Wait, I could have been doing this the whole time." That's exactly why I made this video. Today we're looking at 20 hidden features and lesser-known mechanics that many new players completely overlook. Some of these will save you time, others will make your character stronger, and a few simply make the game far more enjoyable. Even if you've already spent dozens of hours in Conquest of Azeroth, there's a good chance at least a few of these will be new to you. So let's jump right in. Hidden feature number 1. Every class is built around a fantasy, not just a role. One of the first things I noticed after trying several different classes was that Conquest of Azeroth doesn't design classes the same way Blizzard traditionally has. In retail WoW, classes are usually defined by what they do. Tank, healer, damage dealer. Simple. Conquest of Azeroth takes a different approach. Instead of asking, "What role should this class fill?" it asks, "What fantasy should this class deliver?" That might sound like a small difference, but it changes everything. Each class isn't just another version of an existing archetype. Instead, they're built around unique themes, visuals, abilities, and identities. That means two classes performing similar roles can still feel completely different to play. One tank may rely on overwhelming strength. Another might focus on magical protection. A damage dealer might revolve around careful planning, while another rewards constant mobility. This philosophy makes experimenting with different classes much more rewarding. You're not simply changing your abilities. You're experiencing an entirely different style of gameplay. That's something many players don't fully appreciate until they've tried multiple characters. Speaking of classes, here's something many new players overlook before they even enter the world. Hidden feature number 2. The class descriptions contain more information than you think. Let's be honest. Most players don't actually read class descriptions. They skim through them. Look at the artwork. See if the armor looks cool. Then hit Create Character. I was guilty of exactly the same thing. But after creating multiple characters, I realized those descriptions actually contain valuable clues about how each class is supposed to be played. Sometimes they hint at whether a class is difficult to master. Sometimes they emphasize mobility. Other times they explain whether a class focuses on sustained damage, burst damage, support, or survivability. Those little details become much more meaningful once you've actually spent time playing. If you're still trying to decide on your first class, it's worth slowing down for just a few extra minutes. Read everything carefully. The developers often tell you exactly what kind of experience that class is designed to provide. You just have to pay attention. Now here's something that completely changed the way I approach progression. Hidden feature number 3. Talents often change abilities instead of just buffing them. If you've spent years playing traditional MMORPGs, you're probably used to talents giving fairly predictable bonuses. More critical strike chance. A little extra damage. Slightly shorter cooldowns. Useful, but not exactly exciting. Conquest of Azeroth does something much more interesting. Many talents don't simply make abilities stronger. They actually change how those abilities work. A spell that normally targets one enemy might suddenly affect several. An ability you thought was only defensive could become offensive. Entire rotations can change depending on which talents you choose. This means your talent tree isn't just a list of percentage increases. It's closer to a toolkit that lets you shape your class around your preferred playstyle. That's why blindly copying someone else's build can actually reduce your enjoyment. Part of the fun comes from discovering combinations that feel natural to you. The more you experiment, the more you'll realize how much freedom the talent system actually provides. Now let's talk about something you probably noticed, without even realizing it. Hidden feature number 4. The world encourages exploration more than speed. Modern MMORPG players have become obsessed with efficiency. Fastest leveling routes. Best experience per hour. Shortest quest paths. Conquest of Azeroth quietly encourages something different. Exploration. If you only ever follow your quest markers, you'll probably finish the game just fine. but you'll miss a surprising amount along the way. Interesting NPCs, beautiful locations, unique quest chains, hidden corners of familiar zones. One thing I loved about my first playthrough was accidentally wandering off the main path. Sometimes I'd find an area I'd never seen before. Other times I'd discover small details that reminded me this wasn't simply retail WoW with custom classes. The developers clearly wanted players to look around instead of sprinting toward the next objective. And honestly, the game feels much richer because of it. Now here's something almost every experienced player eventually learns, usually after making the same mistake I did. Hidden feature number 5. Your first build probably won't be your final build. When new players finally settle on a talent setup, many assume that's it. Build complete. Time to level. But Conquest of Azeroth rewards experimentation. As you unlock more talents, gain new abilities, and better understand your class, your priorities naturally change. A talent that felt incredible at level 20 might not fit your rotation later. Another talent you ignored early on could suddenly become the centerpiece of your build. This is perfectly normal. Your character evolves alongside your understanding of the game. Don't become emotionally attached to your very first setup. Think of your build as something that's always improving. The best players aren't the ones who never change their talents. They're the ones who know when to change them. Now let's move away from classes for a moment, because there's another hidden feature that's actually psychological. Hidden feature number 6. The game rewards patience more than speed. One thing I noticed after several leveling sessions was something surprisingly simple. Whenever I rushed, I made more mistakes. I'd overpull enemies, forget important abilities, miss gathering nodes, ignore useful quest rewards, spend unnecessary gold. Meanwhile, whenever I slowed down just a little, everything improved. Combat became cleaner. Inventory management became easier. I noticed details I'd previously ignored. Progress actually felt faster because I wasn't constantly fixing mistakes. It's a strange paradox. Trying to save 30 seconds often ends up costing several minutes. Conquest of Azeroth rewards players who think ahead instead of constantly rushing toward the next objective. Once I accepted that, the entire game became much more enjoyable. And finally, here's one hidden feature that doesn't appear anywhere in the user interface, but it affects every single player. Hidden feature number 7. The community is one of the best resources in the game. Most MMORPGs have guides, wiki pages, YouTube videos, build calculators. Conquest of Azeroth has all of those too. But one thing surprised me. The community itself is incredibly valuable. Some of the best tips I ever learned didn't come from official information. They came from conversations, guild members, dungeon groups, random players answering questions in chat. Someone explained a talent interaction I'd completely misunderstood. Another player recommended a much smoother leveling approach. Someone else warned me about wasting gold on gear I'd immediately replace. Those little conversations saved me hours. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Every experienced player was once a beginner too. Most communities appreciate players who genuinely want to learn. And sometimes, one sentence from another player can teach you more than an hour of watching guides. If you've made it this far, you've probably noticed something. None of these hidden features are flashy. They don't suddenly make your character overpowered. They don't hand you legendary gear. Instead, they're the kinds of things that quietly improve your experience over dozens of hours. They're the details that experienced players eventually learn without even realizing it. And these next 7 are some of my favorites. Hidden feature number 8. Every class has a learning curve. One thing I noticed after trying several different classes was how differently they evolve. Some classes feel incredibly powerful almost immediately. Within the first few levels, everything just clicks. Your abilities flow together. Combat feels smooth. You immediately understand what the class is trying to do. Other classes, not so much. Some feel awkward during the early game because you're missing important talents or key abilities that completely change the way the class plays later on. I almost abandoned one class because I thought it was boring. Then, about 10 levels later, I unlocked a few core talents. Suddenly everything made sense. The rotation became faster. Abilities started interacting with each other. The class transformed into one of the most enjoyable experiences I'd had. That's something many new players don't realize. Your first impression isn't always the whole story. If a class feels strange at first, Give it a little time before deciding it's not for you. Sometimes the best classes are simply slow starters. Now here's something that surprised me because it has nothing to do with combat. Hidden feature number 9. Inventory management is actually part of progression. Let's be honest. Nobody starts an MMO because they're excited about inventory management. It's probably one of the least glamorous parts of any RPG. But after enough hours in Conquest of Azeroth, I realized something. Players with organized inventories spend far less time doing unnecessary work. Think about it. How often have you stopped in the middle of questing because your bags were full? How many times have you accidentally sold something useful? Or forgotten where you stored an important crafting material? Those little interruptions don't feel significant in the moment. But over the course of 50 or 60 hours, they add up. Experienced players naturally develop systems. They keep crafting materials together. Quest items in one place. Consumables easy to find. Equipment organized. It's not because they're obsessed with organization. It's because it saves time. The less time you spend fighting your inventory, the more time you spend actually playing the game. Speaking of saving time, here's something that took me embarrassingly long to realize. Hidden feature number 10. Your map tells you more than just where to go. For most players, the map is just a navigation tool. Open it. Find a quest. Run to the objective. Close it. Simple. But if you slow down for a moment, you'll notice the map gives you much more information than that. You start understanding how zones connect, where major roads lead, which areas are densely packed with enemies, where towns, vendors, and flight paths are located. Over time, you stop relying on quest markers. Instead, you begin learning the world itself. That familiarity makes everything faster. You spend less time getting lost, less time taking unnecessary routes. And eventually, Azeroth starts feeling like a place you actually know instead of just following arrows across. It's a small change, but it makes the world feel much more immersive. Now let's talk about something players usually discover completely by accident. Hidden feature number 11. Experimenting is part of the game. One of the biggest differences between Conquest of Azeroth and many other MMORPGs is that experimentation doesn't feel like you're playing incorrectly. Quite the opposite. It feels encouraged. Sometimes you'll try a talent because it simply sounds interesting. Maybe it isn't considered the strongest option. Maybe you've never seen anyone recommend it. But then, it surprises you. Perhaps it makes solo content much easier. Maybe it creates a smoother rotation. Maybe it's simply more fun. That's something I genuinely appreciate about the game's design. It rewards curiosity. Not every experiment will work. Some builds will be terrible. Some talents won't fit your playstyle. And that's perfectly okay. Failure isn't wasted time. It's how you discover what actually works for you. Here's another hidden feature that many players overlook simply because they're too focused on themselves. Hidden feature number 12. Watching other players teaches you more than you think. Whenever you're waiting in town, standing near a training area, or running a dungeon, take a moment to observe the people around you. Seriously, watch how they move. Watch which abilities they prioritize. Watch how they position themselves. You'd be surprised how much you can learn without anyone saying a single word. Maybe you notice someone using an ability you've completely ignored. Maybe another player handles difficult enemy pulls much more efficiently. Perhaps someone has a UI setup that immediately makes you think. That's actually much cleaner than mine. MMORPGs have always been games where knowledge spreads naturally. You don't always need a guide. Sometimes you simply need to pay attention. Some of my biggest improvements came from quietly watching players who were clearly more experienced than I was. Now let's look at something that's surprisingly rare in modern games. Hidden feature number 13. The journey is designed to be enjoyed. Modern online games often make leveling feel like a tutorial. Everything exists purely to prepare you for endgame. Conquest of Azeroth feels different. The leveling experience actually feels meaningful. Your class slowly grows. Your abilities evolve. Your understanding improves. You're constantly learning. The game isn't simply delaying the real content. The journey itself is part of the experience. That's why rushing can actually reduce your enjoyment. Every time you slow down enough to appreciate a zone, experiment with talents, or simply explore somewhere unfamiliar, you're experiencing what the developers clearly wanted players to experience. Not everything has to be optimized. Sometimes it's okay to simply enjoy the adventure. And finally, Here's one hidden feature that's easy to miss because it isn't really a game mechanic. It's a mindset. Hidden feature number 14. Every character teaches you something. One thing I love about Conquest of Azeroth is that every new character feels like an opportunity to learn. Maybe your first class teaches positioning. Another teaches resource management. Another rewards planning ahead. Another encourages mobility. Even if you eventually decide to reroll, that first character wasn't wasted. The knowledge stays with you. You'll understand the game better. You'll make smarter decisions. You'll recognize mechanics more quickly. Every character adds another layer to your understanding of the game. Experienced players aren't simply stronger because they have better gear. They're stronger because they've accumulated hundreds of little lessons over time. Every mistake, every dungeon, every experiment, every reroll, it all contributes to becoming a better player. That's one of the most satisfying parts of Conquest of Azeroth. The more you play, the more the game rewards your experience. We've now covered 14 hidden features that many players either overlook or don't fully appreciate. But the final 6 are probably the most interesting of all. They're the kinds of discoveries that completely change the way you think about progression, class design, and even why Conquest of Azeroth has become so popular among longtime World of Warcraft players. And honestly, the very last one might be the biggest hidden feature in the entire game. We've talked about classes, talents, exploration, progression, and even the community. But these final 6 hidden features are the ones that completely changed how I look at Conquest of Azeroth. They're not features you'll find in a menu. They're things you slowly realize after spending enough time in the game. And once you notice them, you can't unsee them. Hidden feature number 15. Your build evolves as you improve. One thing I absolutely love about Conquest of Azeroth is that your build grows with your experience. When you're brand new, you naturally gravitate towards simple talents. Maybe they increase your damage, make your abilities easier to use, or improve your survivability. Those are great choices when you're still learning. But after you've played your class for a while, something interesting starts to happen. You become more confident. You understand your rotation better. You know when to use your cooldowns. You recognize which enemies are dangerous and which ones aren't. Suddenly, the talents you ignored before begin to make sense. Abilities that once looked too complicated become exciting. You start experimenting more. Your build changes, not because someone told you to change it, but because you've become a better player. That's something I rarely see people talk about. Progression isn't just about your character. It's about you growing alongside your character. And I think that's one of the smartest parts of Conquest of Azeroth's design. Now here's a feature that's hidden in plain sight. Most players see it every day, but never really think about it. Hidden feature number 16. Every zone feels different because your class changes the experience. Ask 2 players about the same zone, and you might get completely different answers. Not because the zone changed, because their classes changed how they experienced it. A highly mobile class might breeze through certain quests. A tanky class can comfortably pull larger groups of enemies. A ranged class may find difficult encounters much easier than a melee-focused character. Even the order you approach enemies can feel completely different depending on your toolkit. That's something I really appreciate. The game isn't just designed around the world. It's designed around your character interacting with that world. That means replaying familiar zones on another class often feels surprisingly fresh. You're solving the same problems in completely different ways. It's one of the reasons re-rolling doesn't feel repetitive. It feels like seeing Azeroth from another perspective. Here's another thing I didn't appreciate until much later. Hidden feature number 17. Small improvements add up faster than big ones. When players think about progression, they usually imagine huge upgrades. A legendary item, a powerful weapon, an amazing talent. Those moments feel incredible, but they're actually pretty rare. Most of your progress comes from much smaller improvements. Learning a cleaner rotation, organizing your inventory, using interrupts more consistently, managing your gold more carefully, choosing better routes between quests, reading your talents more closely. Each one seems insignificant on its own, but after 50 hours, those tiny improvements completely transform your experience. You level faster. You die less often. You earn more gold. Combat becomes smoother. One of the best habits you can develop is asking yourself after every play session, what's one thing I learned today? It doesn't have to be a huge discovery. Even one small improvement every day eventually turns you into a much stronger player. Now let's talk about one of the biggest reasons people keep coming back to Conquest of Azeroth. Hidden feature number 18, discovery never really stops. One thing I expected was eventually reaching a point where I felt like I'd seen everything. Instead, I kept discovering new things. Maybe it was a different talent combination, a class interaction I hadn't noticed, a useful quality of life trick, a better way to approach a dungeon, or simply another player's clever strategy. That's one of the strengths of games with deep systems. The more you learn, the more you realize there is still left to discover. Even experienced players regularly find new ideas. That's exciting. It keeps the game feeling fresh long after your first character reaches higher levels. Discovery isn't just part of the beginning. It's part of the entire journey. Now here's something that might surprise you, because it isn't really about gameplay at all. Hidden feature number 19. The community is constantly discovering new strategies. No single player has all the answers. And that's one of the things that makes Conquest of Azeroth interesting. Every week, players test new talent combinations, experiment with different playstyles, share dungeon strategies, discuss class changes, analyze updates. Someone somewhere is always trying something different. That means the community itself is constantly evolving. What people believed was the best build a month ago might not be considered optimal today. And honestly, that's a good thing. It means the game stays alive. Instead of everyone following one solved formula forever, players continue experimenting together. If you enjoy theory crafting or simply reading discussions, you'll quickly realize how much knowledge comes directly from the community. The game keeps changing because the players keep learning. And finally, the biggest hidden feature in Conquest of Azeroth isn't a mechanic. It isn't a class. It isn't a talent. It's something much simpler. Hidden feature number 20. The best experience is your first experience. This might sound strange, but hear me out. Eventually, you'll know every zone. You'll understand your class. You'll memorize dungeon mechanics. You'll recognize useful talents. You'll stop making beginner mistakes. That's inevitable. But there's one thing you can never recreate. Your first adventure. The excitement of choosing your first class. The curiosity of trying abilities you've never seen before. The satisfaction of finally understanding how everything works. The unexpected moments that weren't part of any guide. That's why I always tell new players the same thing. Watch guides. Learn from experienced players. Avoid obvious mistakes. But don't let optimization replace discovery. Some of the best memories you'll make won't come from playing perfectly. They'll come from making mistakes. From laughing when things go wrong. From exploring somewhere you weren't supposed to. From trying a strange build just because it sounded fun. Those moments are what you'll actually remember years later. Not your exact leveling speed. Not your damage numbers. The adventure. And that's something no guide can give you. So those were 20 hidden features and overlooked details that many players completely miss when starting Conquest of Azeroth. Some of them make your journey smoother. Some help you understand the game better. And others simply remind you to slow down and enjoy what makes Conquest of Azeroth different from every other version of World of Warcraft. Now I want to hear from you. Which hidden feature surprised you the most? Or maybe you've discovered something that wasn't mentioned in this video. Share it in the comments below. You might help another new player without even realizing it. If you enjoyed this guide, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel and lets me know you'd like to see more Conquest of Azeroth content. And if you're planning to spend more time in KOA, consider subscribing because I've got plenty more videos on the way, including class breakdowns, beginner guides, leveling tips, patch summaries, and deep dives into the game's unique systems. Thanks for watching, enjoy your adventure, and I'll see you in the next video.